Marcus Chun had been scavenging through the ruins of the abandoned Zalari colony on Kepler 442b for 3 days when he found her. The mining operation he worked for had sent him to salvage whatever technology remained after the colony's mysterious collapse 6 months ago. The company didn't care about the fate of the colonists. They only wanted the valuable quantum processors the Zalari were famous for manufacturing. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the broken dome of what used to be a residential sector. Marcus moved carefully through the debris, his environmental suit's sensors scanning for any intact tech. The air inside the dome was still breathable, though barely, maintained by emergency life support systems running on their last reserves of power. He almost missed her entirely. A faint heat signature registered on his scanner, so weak it could have been a dying power cell. But something made him investigate. Behind a collapsed wall panel, in what looked like a makeshift shelter, lay a figure that made his heart stop. She was Zalari. That much was obvious from her distinctive blue-gray skin and the elegant bone ridges that framed her face. But where healthy Zalari stood 7 feet tall with robust frames, she looked fragile, diminished. Her breathing was shallow, her normally luminescent skin dull and cracked. Dark purple blood had dried around numerous cuts and bruises. She couldn't have been more than the equivalent of 20 Earth years old. Marcus had seen death before in his years as a salvager, but something about finding her still clinging to life in this ghost town hit him differently. He knelt beside her, pulling out his emergency medical scanner. The readings were grim. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, multiple infections, and organ systems on the verge of shutdown. "Hey," he said softly, knowing she probably couldn't understand English, but hoping his tone would convey his intentions. "I'm going to help you." Her eyes fluttered open, large, violet irises with horizontal pupils that struggled to focus on him. She made a weak sound, somewhere between a whimper and a word in her own language. Her hand moved slightly, and he saw she was clutching something, a small data pad, its screen cracked but still faintly glowing. Marcus didn't hesitate. He activated his suit's emergency beacon, calling his ship's AI to prep the medical bay, then carefully lifted her. She weighed almost nothing, her body wasted away to dangerous levels. As he carried her through the ruins toward his landing site, she pressed the data pad against his chest with what little strength she had left. Okay, I'll take it," he assured her, securing the device. "Just hang on. We're getting you out of here." The walk to his ship felt endless. Every few steps, he checked to make sure she was still breathing. The settlement around them told a story of catastrophe. Blast marks on walls, makeshift barricades, signs of a desperate last stand. But against what? The official reports had mentioned system failures and evacuation, nothing about conflict. His ship, the Perseverance, sat waiting in the colony's landing bay. Marcus had never been so glad to see its battered hull. He rushed up the ramp, heading straight for the compact medical bay he'd retrofitted from an old military field hospital unit. "Arya," he called his AI, "full medical protocol. We have a Zalari female, critical condition." Acknowledged, the AI responded. "Warning, Zalari physiology database is limited. Treatment options may be incomplete. Do your best." He laid her gently on the medical bed, watching as the automated systems began their work. For lines snaked out, searching for viable veins. Sensors scanned her body, building a real-time model of her injuries and condition. "Marcus," Arya's voice carried an unusual note of urgency. "Initial scans show something unexpected. This individual appears to be. I need to run additional tests, but preliminary genetic markers suggest she may be from the Zalari prime bloodline." "Prime bloodline?" Marcus frowned, working to remove her torn clothing so the medical systems could better access her injuries. The Zalari were notoriously secretive about their social structure. Historical records indicate the Zalari maintain certain genetic lines for optimal fertility and genetic diversity. If these readings are correct, she would be considered extremely valuable to their species' survival. The implications hit him like a shock wave. The Zalari population had been declining for decades, their fertility rates plummeting due to some genetic bottleneck no one fully understood. If she really was from a prime bloodline. "Marcus," Arya interrupted his thoughts. "I've stabilized her vital signs, but She requires nutrients specific to Zalari physiology. Our standard supplies won't suffice. I can synthesize appropriate compounds, but it will take time. How much time does she have? Without proper nutrition, approximately 10 hours. With our current measures, perhaps 36 hours. Then get started. Marcus looked down at the unconscious girl, her face peaceful despite everything she'd endured. And Arya? Start translating that datapad she was carrying. Quiet mode. I don't want anything broadcasting our position until we know what happened here. As the ship's medical systems worked to save her life, Marcus found himself studying her features. Despite her species differences, there was something undeniably person-like about her. The way her brow furrowed slightly in unconscious distress, how her fingers twitched as if reaching for something in her dreams. Hours passed. Marcus barely left the medical bay, monitoring her progress and helping Arya adjust treatments as they learned more about her specific needs. Slowly, painfully slowly, her vital signs began to improve. Color returned to her skin in patches, the gray taking on a healthier blue tint. It was near dawn, ship time, when she first showed signs of true consciousness. Her eyes opened gradually, that striking violet color now sharp and aware. She looked around the medical bay with obvious confusion before her gaze settled on Marcus. "Hi," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "You're safe. You're on my ship. I found you in the colony." She tried to speak, but only a rasp emerged. Marcus quickly brought her water, specially treated by Arya to match Zalari biological requirements. She drank slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. "My name is Marcus," he said, pointing to himself. "Marcus." She watched him for a long moment, then pointed a shaking finger at herself. "Zuaira," she managed, her voice like whispered music despite its weakness. "Zuaira," Marcus repeated, and was rewarded with what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Nice to meet you, Zuaira. You're going to be okay." She shook her head weakly and said something in her own language, her tone urgent despite her exhaustion. She looked around, apparently searching for something, growing more agitated. "The datapad?" Marcus guessed, pulling it from where he'd secured it. "It's here, it's safe." She relaxed slightly upon seeing it, but pushed it back toward him, speaking again in her melodious language. Her frustration at not being understood was evident. "Arya," Marcus said, "how's that translation coming?" "I've decoded approximately 40%. It appears to be a personal journal mixed with technical specifications of some kind." "Marcus, I'm detecting mentions of a bioweapon, genetic targeting, and something called the fertility plague." Zuaira must have recognized some of the words because she nodded vigorously, then winced at the pain the movement caused. She gestured at herself, then at the datapad, then made a sweeping motion that seemed to encompass everything. "Are you trying to tell me what happened to your colony?" Marcus asked. She nodded again, then pointed at herself and held up a single finger. "One." Was she saying she was the only survivor? "Arya, scan the entire colony for life signs," Marcus ordered. "Scanning." "Marcus, I'm detecting no other Zalari life signatures." She appears to be the sole survivor. The weight of that revelation settled over the medical bay. An entire colony gone, and somehow this young woman had survived when no one else had. Marcus looked at her, Zoira, and saw the profound sadness in her eyes. But there was something else there too. Determination. She spoke again, a longer string of words, and though Marcus couldn't understand the language, the tone was unmistakable. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a witness, and whatever was on that datapad, she'd risked everything to preserve it. "We're going to figure this out," Marcus promised her. "Whatever happened here, we'll make sure people know. You have my word." Zuaira studied his face for a long moment, then did something that transcended species barriers. She reached out and gently squeezed his hand. Her skin was cool to the touch, with an interesting texture like fine silk over firm muscle. The gesture was brief, but the trust it conveyed was absolute. "Arya," Marcus said, not breaking eye contact with Zuaira, set course for Harmony Station. "Keep us running dark until we clear the system, and continue working on that translation." Priority 1. Acknowledged. "Marcus, should I report our passenger to the authorities?" Marcus thought about it. A Zalari survivor from a mysteriously destroyed colony, possibly carrying information about a bioweapon, who might be one of the last fertile females of her species. The political implications were staggering. The wrong people learning about her could put her in even more danger. Not yet, he decided. Not until we know more about what happened here. And not until she's strong enough to speak for herself. Zuaira had already drifted back into sleep, her body still fighting to recover from her ordeal. Marcus carefully tucked a thermal blanket around her, then settled into a chair nearby. He'd pulled plenty of valuable salvage from dead colonies over the years, but this she was different. As the Perseverance lifted off from the dead world, leaving the ghost colony behind, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that saving Zuaira was going to change everything. He just had no idea how much. The ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying its precious cargo away from the graveyard of Kepler, 442b. In the medical bay, Marcus kept watch over the sleeping Zalari woman, while Ario worked tirelessly to decode her datapad secrets. Whatever came next, he'd made a choice in those ruins. He'd chosen life over salvage, compassion over profit. He'd chosen to save her. Now, he just had to keep her alive long enough to save her people. The hyperspace jump would take 3 days. 3 days to learn her language, to understand what had happened, to figure out why she'd survived when no one else had. 3 days before they reached the relative safety of Harmony Station, where new dangers would undoubtedly await. Marcus looked at the datapad in his hands, its cracked screen reflecting his worried face. Whatever secrets it held had been worth dying for. Zuaira had proven that by nearly doing so. The question now was whether those secrets would be worth living for, worth fighting for. As the ship hummed through the void between stars, carrying the last daughter of a dying world toward an uncertain future, Marcus made a silent promise. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, he would help her. Not because she might be valuable to her species' survival, not because of any reward, but because it was the right thing to do. It was, after all, the human thing to do. The medical monitors beeped softly, tracking Zuaira's improving vitals. Each heartbeat was a small victory against death, each breath a defiance of whatever forces had destroyed her world. And in that quiet medical bay, watching over her as she slept, Marcus began to understand that saving her was just the beginning. The real challenge would be keeping her alive in a universe that had already tried so hard to kill her. But as he settled in for his vigil, Marcus felt the determination settling into his bones. He'd been a salvager, picking through the remnants of dead worlds. Now perhaps he could help salvage something far more precious. Hope for a dying species, carried in the form of one brave young woman who'd refused to give up. The stars streaked by outside, indifferent to the drama playing out within the small ship. But inside, life persisted. Life endured. And sometimes, Marcus reflected, that was the most human thing of all, the stubborn refusal to let death have the final word. As Zuaira slept, her body slowly healing, the datapad's secrets waiting to be unlocked, Marcus kept watch. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. Human and Zalari, bound now by the simple act of one person choosing to help another. It was a small thing, perhaps, in the vast scope of the universe. But, as Marcus would soon learn, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could echo across the stars, changing the fate of entire civilizations. The journey to Harmony Station continued, carrying them toward a future neither could yet imagine. The universal translator finally cracked Zuaira's language on the second day of their journey to Harmony Station. Marcus was dozing in his chair beside her medical bed when Aria's announcement startled him awake. "Marcus, I've achieved full translation capability for the Zalari language. I can now provide real-time translation for verbal communication." He sat up quickly, rubbing the exhaustion from his eyes. Zuaira was awake too, watching him with those striking violet eyes that seemed to hold depths of intelligence and sorrow. "Can you understand me now?" Marcus asked, watching as Aria's translation played through the medical bay's speakers in the melodious tones of Zalari. Zuaira's eyes widened, and for the first time since he'd found her, he saw hope bloom across her features. "You can understand me?" she asked, her voice still weak, but filled with wonder. The translator rendered her words into English with only a slight delay. "Yes," Marcus said, unable to contain his smile. "We can finally talk properly. How are you feeling?" "Alive," she said simply, then added, "Because of you, I owe you a debt that cannot be measured. Marcus Chun. You don't owe me anything. Anyone would have. No, she interrupted, her voice gaining strength. They would not. My people have been abandoned by the galaxy. What happened to us, it was not an accident, and everyone knows it. Yet no one came. Only you. Marcus leaned forward. Zyra, what happened to your colony? The official report said it was system failures, but the damage I saw. Her face darkened, and she was quiet for so long Marcus thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her words carried the weight of witnessed horror. They called it the fertility plague, she said, a bioweapon designed specifically for Zalari physiology. It started 6 months ago. First, our pregnant females began falling ill. Within days, every pregnancy failed. Then, the weapon evolved, began targeting anyone of reproductive age. She paused, her hands clenching the blanket. My father was the colony's lead geneticist. He recognized it for what it was, not a natural disease, but an engineered genocide. The weapon was designed to spread through our population, rewriting our genetic code to make reproduction impossible. Who would do such a thing? Marcus asked, though he had dark suspicions about certain human supremacist groups and competing alien civilizations who viewed the Zalari's technological advancement as a threat. We never found out for certain, Zyra admitted. But my father discovered something else. The weapon had markers, signatures in its genetic structure. It was based on stolen Zalari research. Our own fertility enhancement programs turned against us. She gestured weakly toward the datapad. Everything is in there. My father's research, his findings, the genetic sequences of the weapon. And something else. She met his eyes. A potential cure. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. A cure? Then, we need to get this information to the Zalari homeworld immediately. There is more you need to understand, Zyra said softly. I survived because I am different. My bloodline carries genetic markers from before our species' bottleneck event 3 centuries ago. We are called the prime carriers. Our genetics are more diverse, more resilient. The weapon affected me, but could not complete its program. Arya mentioned something about prime bloodlines, Marcus said. She said you might be important to your species' survival. Zyra's laugh was bitter. Important? Yes, I suppose I am. Do you know how many prime carriers remained before the plague? 12. 12 females in the entire Zalari civilization. Now, she closed her eyes. Now there might only be me. The weight of that statement hung in the air. Marcus tried to imagine the pressure, the sheer, overwhelming responsibility of possibly being the last hope for an entire species. The cure my father developed, Zyra continued. It requires genetic material from a prime carrier to synthesize. He tested it on me during the early stages of my infection. It worked, but she trailed off. But it requires something else. Something my father discovered by accident. The plague damaged our ability to reproduce with our own kind, but it created an unexpected side effect. A compatibility with certain other species' genetic markers. Specifically, she looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Human markers. Marcus blinked, certain he'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? The weapon that was meant to end us might have accidentally created a path to survival. Zalari human hybrid offspring, previously thought impossible, could now theoretically exist. And more importantly, such hybrids would be immune to the plague while retaining Zalari genetic markers. Marcus struggled to process this information. That's incredible, but also terrifying. The political implications alone. Which is why I cannot simply broadcast this information, Zyra said. There are those among both our species who would see this as an abomination. Others would see me as nothing more than breeding stock, a resource to be controlled. I need to reach the right people, scientists who can verify my father's work and develop the cure without. She shuddered. Without reducing me to a laboratory specimen. Marcus stood and began pacing, his mind racing. Harmony Station has a Zalari embassy. We could— No, Zyra said quickly. I cannot trust the embassy. Before the colony fell, we received messages. Some among the Zalari leadership knew the plague was coming. They chose to sacrifice the outer colonies to protect the homeworld. They might have even been complicit. Then what do you suggest? There is a scientist on Harmony Station, Zyra said. Elena Vasquez. She has worked with both human and Zalari genetic research. My father corresponded with her. If anyone can verify his work and help develop the cure properly, it would be her. Marcus nodded slowly. All right, we'll find this Dr. Vasquez. But, Zyra, you need to know something. Harmony Station it's not the safest place. It's neutral territory, which means everyone goes there, including people who might be looking for you. Understand the risks, she said firmly. But I cannot hide forever. My people are dying. Every day I delay is more Zalari who will never have children, more of my species' future erased. Over the next day, as Zyra grew stronger, they developed their plan. Marcus used his salvager credentials to book a berth at the station's lower docks, away from the main traffic areas. They would enter quietly, find Dr. Vasquez, and determine their next steps based on what she could tell them. Zyra proved to be a quick study in human customs and behavior, preparing for the need to blend in at the station. Marcus fabricated documentation identifying her as his assistant, recently hired for a salvage operation. It wouldn't stand up to serious scrutiny, but it might get them through casual inspection. Marcus, she said during one of the planning sessions, I need to ask you something. Go ahead. Why are you helping me? You could have left me to die. You could turn me over to the authorities now and likely receive a substantial reward. Yet you risk yourself for a stranger, an alien. This is not logical. Marcus considered his answer carefully. My grandmother used to tell me stories about Earth's history, about times when people were judged by their race, their religion, their nationality, about how the greatest human acts were when people chose compassion over fear, when they helped others simply because it was right. He met her eyes. Maybe it's not logical, but seeing you dying in those ruins, knowing I could help, there wasn't really a choice. Not for me. Zyra was quiet for a moment. Your species is young by galactic standards. Many consider humans reckless, unpredictable, but perhaps what they call recklessness is actually your greatest strength. The willingness to act on emotion, on principle, even when logic says otherwise. We prefer to call it humanity, Marcus said with a slight smile. Humanity, she repeated, testing the word. I think I understand why your species uses that term for compassion. It seems to be your defining characteristic. As they approached Harmony Station, the massive structure grew from a point of light to a sprawling city in space. Multiple rings rotated around a central core, each section devoted to different species' environmental needs. Ships of every configuration docked at ports that jutted out like spokes from a wheel. Big place, Zyra observed, standing beside Marcus on the bridge for the first time since her rescue. She wore a modified environmental suit that concealed her distinctive features while allowing for her different proportions. 20 million inhabitants last census, Marcus confirmed. Every major species has a presence here. It's about as close to neutral ground as exists in known space. And therefore the perfect place for those with dark intentions to hide, she added. That too. Arya guided them to their assigned berth in the industrial section. The docking was smooth, automated systems taking control for the final approach. As the ship settled into place, Marcus turned to Zyra. Remember, keep the helmet polarized until we're somewhere private. Your bone structure is too distinctive. Anyone who knows what to look for will identify you as Zalari immediately. I understand. She paused, then placed a hand on his arm. Even through the suit, he could feel the unusual coolness of her touch. Marcus, if something happens to me, promise me you'll get the data pad to Dr. Vasquez. The cure is more important than one life. Nothing's going to happen to you, Marcus said firmly. We're going to find the doctor, develop the cure, and save your people. All of them. She squeezed his arm gently. Your optimism is very human. I find it comforting. They made their way through the station's industrial sector without incident. The area was populated mostly by workers and automated systems, with few security checkpoints. Marcus had been here before on salvage runs and knew the back routes. Dr. Vasquez's laboratory was in the science quarter, a mid-level section that required passing through more populated areas. As they entered the main promenade, Zyra tensed beside him. The sheer variety of species moving through the wide corridor was overwhelming. Insectoid Crothin clicking past in groups, aquatic Bendathi in their mobility suits, the occasional human or humanoid species. So many lives, Zyra murmured through their private comm channel, all continuing as if the universe hasn't changed. Don't they know an entire species is dying? Most don't, Marcus admitted. And Many who do, they see it as natural selection, survival of the fittest. Then, they understand nothing of loss, she said quietly. They were halfway to the science quarter when Marcus noticed they were being followed. Two figures in nondescript clothing had been maintaining a steady distance behind them for the last 3 corridors. "We have company," he murmured to Zuaira. "Don't react. Just keep walking." "How many?" "2 that I can see. Maybe more ahead." They reached a junction where 5 corridors met. Marcus was about to suggest a detour when a figure stepped out directly in their path. Human, male, with the kind of forgettable face that screamed intelligence operative. "Mr. Chun," the man said pleasantly. "And guest. Might we have a word?" Marcus's hand moved instinctively toward the small plasma pistol concealed in his jacket. "I think you have me confused with someone else." "I don't think so." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You recently departed Kepler 442b with salvage that wasn't on your manifest. My employers are very interested in recovering lost Zalari technology. I filed all the proper forms," Marcus said evenly. "Check with the Salvage Guild." "Oh, we're not concerned with forms." The man's gaze shifted to Zuaira. "We're more interested in biological salvage. Very rare, very valuable. Some might say priceless to the right parties." Marcus felt Zuaira tense beside him, could sense her preparing to fight or flee. But they were outnumbered in a public space with nowhere to run. "I don't deal in biologicals," Marcus said. "Guild regulations are very clear on that." "How noble." The man took a step closer. "But perhaps your companion would like to speak for herself? I'm sure she has quite a story to tell." Before anyone could react, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the corridor in red, and an automated voice began speaking in multiple languages. "Security alert. All citizens proceed to designated safe zones." This is not a drill. The crowd around them erupted into chaos as people began rushing in all directions. Marcus grabbed Ura's hand and pulled her into the flowing mass of bodies, using the confusion to break away from their pursuers. "This way," he shouted over the noise, ducking into a maintenance corridor he remembered from previous visits. They ran through narrow passages, the alarms continuing to wail. Behind them, Marcus could hear pursuit. Their followers hadn't given up. "What's happening?" Zuaira asked as they paused at an intersection to catch their breath. "Could be anything. Pirates, system malfunction, diplomatic incident." Marcus checked his portable scanner, trying to get a fix on their location. "But the timing is suspicious." "You think it's connected to us?" "I think someone really wants to find you, and they're not above causing station-wide panic to do it." They emerged into a quieter section of the science quarter. The alarms were more muted here, and fewer people were in the corridors. Marcus quickly located the directory and found Dr. Vasquez's lab, 2 levels up and 3 sections over. "Almost there," he told Zuaira. "Just a little further." They took a service elevator, hoping to avoid the main thoroughfares. As the doors opened on their destination floor, they found themselves face-to-face with a security checkpoint that definitely hadn't been there during Marcus's last visit. "Identification," the human guard demanded, his hand resting on his weapon. Marcus produced his salvager credentials, trying to project calm. The guard scanned them, frowning. "And your companion?" "New assistant," Marcus said. "First time on the station. Documentation is still being processed." The guard's frown deepened. "Remove the helmet. Visual confirmation required during security alerts." Marcus felt his heart sink. Once Zuaira revealed her features, it would all be over. But before she could comply, another voice cut through the tension. "That won't be necessary, officer." A woman in a white lab coat emerged from behind the checkpoint. She was in her 50s with sharp eyes behind smart glasses and an air of unquestionable authority. "Dr. Vasquez," the guard said, surprised. "This is a security matter, and these are my expected guests," Dr. Vasquez interrupted smoothly. "Mr. Chun is consulting on a xenobiology project. I'll take full responsibility for them." The guard hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and deference to the respected scientist. Finally, he stepped aside. "They're your responsibility, doctor." "They always are," she said dryly. "Come, Mr. Chun. We have much to discuss." They followed her through sterile corridors to a laboratory that was part research facility, part fortress. Multiple security doors sealed behind them, and Marcus noticed the telltale shimmer of military-grade shielding. Only when they were secured in her private office did Dr. Vasquez speak again. "You can remove the helmet, Zuaira. You're safe here." Zuaira hesitated, then complied, her distinctive features emerging as the helmet retracted. Dr. Vasquez studied her with scientific fascination mixed with genuine concern. "Remarkable," the doctor murmured. "The prime bloodline features are even more pronounced than the text suggested. Your father's messages didn't do you justice." "You knew my father?" Zuaira asked. "We collaborated for years, though we never met in person. When his messages stopped coming 6 months ago, I fear the worst." She paused. "I'm sorry for your loss. He was a brilliant scientist and, for what I could tell, a devoted father." Zuaira blinked back tears. "He died getting the cure data to me. Everything is on this." She produced the data pad, offering it to the doctor. Dr. Vasquez accepted it reverently. "May I?" At Zuaira's nod, she connected it to her secure system. Data flowed across multiple screens, genetic sequences, chemical formulas, research notes in multiple languages. "My God," the doctor breathed as she absorbed the information. "He actually did it. A cure for the plague. And these compatibility markers." She turned to stare at Zuaira. "Do you understand what this means? That I might be able to save my people?" Zuaira said simply. "More than that," Dr. Vasquez said. "This could reshape the entire understanding of species barriers. The implications are staggering. But also," she frowned, "dangerous. There are those who would kill to suppress this information, or to control it. We've already discovered that," Marcus said, describing their encounter in the corridor. Dr. Vasquez's expression darkened. "It's worse than you know. The security alert isn't random. Someone used a fake bioweapon threat specifically targeting Zalari refugees. They're systematically searching the station, and they have governmental backing. Then, we need to move quickly," Clara said. "Can you synthesize the cure? With your genetic material as a base?" "Yes, but it will take time, and we'll need to test it carefully. Your father's notes indicate the cure must be tailored to each bloodline. We're not just creating one cure, but potentially dozens of variations." "How long? To create enough for meaningful distribution?" "Weeks, maybe months. And that's assuming we can work uninterrupted, which seems unlikely given the attention you've attracted." "Zetaras, shoulders, sadja. My people don't have months." "There might be another way," Dr. Vasquez said slowly, her eyes moving between Zura and Marcus. "Your father's research on the hybrid compatibility. If we could create a proof of concept demonstrate that Zalari genetics can be preserved through hybrid offspring, it might buy us political protection and resources." "You're talking about children," Marcus said, his voice carefully neutral. "Zalari human children." "I'm talking about survival," Dr. Vasquez corrected. "The cure is the long-term solution, but in the short term, proving that Zalari genetics can continue through hybrid lines might be the only thing that prevents certain factions from simply letting the species die out." Zuaira was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady. "What would be required? Genetic material from compatible donors. Careful monitoring. A safe environment for gestation." Dr. Vasquez looked at Marcus. "Your genetics are remarkably compatible with Zuaira's. The markers are nearly ideal." "Wait," Marcus said, heat rising to his face. "Are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting nothing," Dr. Vasquez said calmly. "I'm simply presenting scientific facts. What you do with those facts is your decision. But understand this, Zuaira isn't just a survivor. She's a living arc, carrying the genetic future of her entire species. Every day we delay is another step toward extinction." The weight of her words settled over the room. Marcus looked at Zuaira, seeing not just the alien woman he'd saved, but the impossible burden she carried. The last of her line, possibly the last hope for millions. "I need time to think," Zuaira said finally. "This is not a decision to make lightly." "Of course," Dr. Vasquez agreed. "In the meantime, I'll begin synthesizing the cure using the samples we have. But you should know, you're not safe on this station. Word of a surviving prime carrier is already spreading. Every faction with an interest in Zalari fate will be converging on this location. Then, we'll leave," Marcus said. "Take Zuaira somewhere safe while you work on the cure." "Where?" Dr. Vasquez asked. Where in the galaxy is safe for possibly the last fertile Zolari female? It was a question without an easy answer. As alarms continued to sound in the distance and the net closed around them, Marcus realized their desperate flight from Kepler 442b had been only the beginning. The real challenge, keeping Zyera alive long enough to save her species, was just starting. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a traitorous voice whispered about genetic compatibility and the children who might bridge two species. He pushed the thought away, focusing on the immediate crisis. But like Pandora's box, once opened, some ideas couldn't be contained. The future of two species might depend on choices made in the next few hours. Marcus just hoped they would all live long enough to make them. The safe house Dr. Vasquez arranged was hidden in the station's oldest section, where architectural quirks and decades of modifications had created spaces that didn't appear on any official blueprint. Marcus and Zyera had been there for 3 days, waiting while the doctor worked on synthesizing the cure, and the station's security forces continued their random searches. 3 days of forced proximity in a small space. 3 days of learning each other's habits, quirks, and stories. 3 days of dancing around the enormous question that Dr. Vasquez had planted in both their minds. "You're pacing again," Zyera observed from where she sat cross-legged on the floor, studying her father's research on a borrowed tablet. "Sorry," Marcus said, forcing himself to stop. "I hate being trapped. Always have." "Tell me about Earth," she said, setting the tablet aside. "I've studied your world academically, but that's different from hearing personal experiences." Marcus settled onto the worn couch across from her. Over the past days, he'd grown comfortable with her presence, with the way she moved with unconscious grace despite her weakened condition, with how her skin would shimmer different shades of blue-gray, depending on her mood. "What do you want to know?" "Your favorite place?" she said simply. "Where you go when you need peace." "There's this beach in California," Marcus found himself saying. "Rocky cliffs, tide pools, hardly ever any people. I used to go there after difficult salvage runs. Something about the ocean, the rhythm of it, helps clear my head." "We had oceans on Zolera," Arthur said softly. "Purple waters under crimson skies. I haven't seen them since I was small. The colony worlds had lakes, but it wasn't the same." "You'll see them again," Marcus said firmly. "Perhaps." She was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, can I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead. Do you have, that is on Earth, is there someone?" She trailed off, a deeper blue flushing her cheeks. "No," Marcus said, understanding her question. "No wife, no partner. The salvage life doesn't leave much room for relationships. Most people don't want to wait months between visits." "Understand that feeling," Zyera said. "Among my people, I was always the strange one, more interested in genetics and science than social gatherings. My father used to worry I'd never find a mate." Her voice caught slightly. I suppose his worries were justified, though not for the reasons he imagined. "Don't," Marcus said, moving to sit beside her on the floor. "Don't talk like you're already gone. We're going to figure this out." "Are we?" She turned to look at him, and he was struck again by the depth of emotion in those violet eyes. "Even if the cure works, even if we can distribute it, my people are scattered across a dozen worlds. Many colonies have likely fallen like mine. How many Zolari are left? Thousands? Hundreds? Enough," Marcus said. "It only takes a few to rebuild. Earth's history is full of species that came back from the brink. But those species didn't face the additional challenge we do," Zyera said. "The fertility problems existed before the plague. My people were already dying slowly. The bioweapon just accelerated the process." She pulled up a genetic chart on the tablet. "Look at this. My father's analysis of prime carrier genetics versus the general population. We're throwbacks, Marcus. Genetic anomalies that somehow retain diversity our species lost. Even if every Zolari survivor could breed with a prime carrier, within 3 generations the genetic bottleneck would reassert itself. Unless," Marcus said slowly, seeing where her thoughts were leading, "unless we introduce new genetic diversity from another source," she finished. "The plague's modification to our genetics, the compatibility it accidentally created with human DNA, my father believed it might be the key to our long-term survival. That's a hell of a burden to put on potential children," Marcus said. "Being born is the bridge between two species. Every child carries the hopes of their parents, Zuaira replied. These would simply carry the hopes of two civilizations. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the conversation settling around them. Finally, Zuaira spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been thinking about what Dr. Vasquez said. About proof of concept. About time running out. She took a deep breath. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly, not out of pity or obligation. Marcus's heart began to pound, but he kept his voice steady. Ask, do you find me? She paused, searching for words. Could you see me as more than just an alien you rescued? As a person? As a woman? The question hung in the air between them. Marcus looked at her, really looked, past the blue-gray skin and bone ridges, past the biological differences to the person beneath. The brilliant scientist who'd inherited her father's curiosity. The survivor who'd endured unimaginable loss without breaking. The woman who could find wonder in his stories of Earth's oceans while her own world burned. Yes, he said simply. Zuaira, you're one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. Any man, human or otherwise, will be lucky to know you. But could you? She stopped, then started again with determination. Could you imagine a future with me? Not just as friends or allies, but as more? Marcus reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. Her skin was cool against his, that silk over steel texture he'd noticed in the medical bay. I've been trying not to imagine it, he admitted. It felt wrong, like I'd be taking advantage. You're vulnerable, depending on my help. The power dynamic? Stop. Zuaira interrupted. Do you think so little of my agency? Of my ability to make choices? Her grip on his hand tightened. Marcus, I've lost everything. My family, my world, my future as I once imagined it. But meeting you, being saved by you, it gave me something I didn't expect. Hope, not just for my species' survival, but for something personal. Something just for me. Zua, let me finish, she said. I know the practical arguments. Genetic compatibility, species survival, scientific necessity. But that's not why I'm asking. I'm asking because when I wake up from nightmares about the colony, you're there. Because you see me as a person, not a specimen or a symbol. Because despite everything, when I'm with you, I feel like the universe might still hold some joy. Marcus found himself pulling her closer until she was leaning against him, her head on his shoulder. I feel it too, he admitted. Started feeling it days ago, maybe even on the ship. But, Zuaira, this is so much bigger than just us. I know, she said softly, but maybe that's exactly why we should allow ourselves this. If the universe is going to put impossible burdens on us, don't we deserve something real and good to balance it? Before Marcus could respond, their comms crackled to life. Dr. Vasquez's voice was tense with urgency. You need to see this. Both of you. Come to the lab immediately. The journey to the lab was tense, both from external danger and the weight of their interrupted conversation. They took a circuitous route, using maintenance tunnels and service corridors. The station's security alert had been downgraded, but Zalari refugees were still being questioned throughout the habitat. Dr. Vasquez met them at a hidden entrance, her usually composed face showing signs of stress and sleeplessness. What's happened? Marcus asked as they followed her inside. Two things, the doctor said, leading them to her secure office. First, I've successfully synthesized a batch of the cure. Small scale, but enough to prove the concept works. That's wonderful, Zuaira breathed. How soon can we begin distribution? That's where the second issue comes in, Dr. Vasquez said, pulling up a display. 3 hours ago, I received this. The screen showed an official communication bearing the seal of the Galactic Council's Special Committee on Genetic Preservation. Marcus read it with growing alarm. They're declaring Zalari genetic material a protected resource, he said. What does that mean? It means, Dr. Vasquez said grimly, that any Zalari genetic material, including living Zalari, now falls under the jurisdiction of the Council. They're to be collected and preserved for the good of galactic diversity. Collected, Zuaira said flatly. Like specimens. It gets worse, Dr. Vasquez continued. The order specifically mentions prime carriers. They know about you, Zuaira, and they're coming. A council enforcement team will arrive at the station within 6 hours. We have to run, Marcus said immediately. Get back to my ship. They've already impounded it, Dr. Vasquez interrupted. along with every other vessel that's arrived from Zalari space in the last week. They're being thorough. Zyera sank into a chair, the hope that had been building in her visibly crumbling. So, what ends here? I become a laboratory subject, my people's survival reduced to genetic samples in council storage. Not necessarily, Dr. Vasquez said. She looked between them, clearly wrestling with something. There is one provision in council law that could protect you. The interspecies partnership clause. The what? Marcus asked. It's an old law, rarely invoked, the doctor explained. Essentially, if a member of a protected species enters into a recognized partnership with a member of a non-protected species, jurisdiction becomes complicated. The council can't simply take someone who's legally bound to a citizen of a sovereign world. You're talking about marriage, Zyera said. Partnership in the legal sense. Different species have different customs, so the law is broadly written. But, yes, in human terms, marriage. Marcus felt the room spin slightly. You're suggesting we get married to protect Zyera from the council? I'm suggesting, Dr. Vasquez said carefully, that you have 6 hours to decide if what you feel for each other is real enough to make it legal. Because after that, Zyera's choices become extremely limited. And if we do this, Laura asked, what then? The council will challenge it, claim it's a convenience arrangement. Which is why, Dr. Vasquez said, pulling out another data pad, I took the liberty of running some additional tests on the genetic samples you both provided. The compatibility markers aren't just theoretical. With medical assistance, you could actually... She paused. You could have children. Healthy, viable offspring that would carry both human and Zalari genetics. The office fell silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat, could feel Zyera's tension beside him. A child would make the partnership legally unassailable, Dr. Vasquez continued. And, more importantly, it would prove that Zalari genetics can be preserved through hybrid lines. It would change the entire conversation about your species' survival. You're asking us to create a life as a political statement, Marcus said. I'm telling you the facts, Dr. Vasquez replied. What you do with them is your choice. But decide quickly. Every moment we delay is a moment closer to losing all options. Zyera stood abruptly and walked to the window overlooking the lab. Marcus joined her, standing close but not touching. This isn't how I imagined it, she said softly. My father used to tell me stories about Zalari bonding ceremonies. Weeks of preparation, family gatherings, ancient rituals under the stars of our homeworld. She laughed bitterly. Instead, I'm considering a rushed legal contract to avoid becoming a test subject. We don't have to do this, Marcus said. We can find another way. Fight the council order, seek asylum somewhere. With what resources? What lies? Zyera turned to face him. Marcus, tell me honestly. Setting aside all of this, the plague, the council, the fate of my species, could you see yourself with me? Not just now in crisis, but in the future? Could you see us building a life together? Marcus thought about the past days, about conversations that had revealed her sharp wit, her compassion despite loss, her strength in the face of impossible odds. He thought about how natural it felt to have her near, how her absence would leave a void he hadn't expected. Yes, he said. God help me, yes. When this started, I was just trying to save one person. But somewhere along the way, you became important. Essential. Even knowing our children would carry the weight of 2 species' futures. Especially then, Marcus said, they'd need parents who chose each other, not just their duty. Zyera studied his face for a long moment, then made her decision. Dr. Vasquez, she said, not looking away from Marcus. What's required for a legal partnership under council law? Documentation, genetic verification, witness statements, the doctor said. I can handle the technicalities. The question is whether you're certain. I'm certain, Zyera said. Then, softer, to Marcus, are you? Instead of answering with words, Marcus cupped her face gently in his hands, mindful of the delicate bone ridges, and kissed her. Her lips were cooler than a human's, but they warmed quickly, responding with a passion that transcended species boundaries. When they separated, both breathing heavily, Zyera's skin had shifted to a deeper blue that Marcus was beginning to recognize as happiness. I'll take that as a yes, Dr. Vasquez said dryly. Now, let's make this legal before the council arrives. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of documentation, genetic scans, and legal procedures. Dr. Vasquez had connections in the station's administrative sector who expedited the process, understanding the urgency, if not the full details. As they waited for final approval, Zuaira pulled Marcus aside. There's something else we need to discuss. The practical aspects of what Dr. Vasquez suggested. About children, Marcus felt heat rise to his face. We don't have to make any decisions about that immediately. Actually, we might, Zuaira said. My biology is different from humans. The prime carrier genetics include certain timing aspects. If we're going to try this, to create a proof of concept, as Dr. Vasquez put it, we have a window of opportunity that won't repeat for several months. How long a window? Based on my hormone levels and the genetic markers Dr. Vasquez identified, approximately the next 10 to 14 days. That's soon. I know. She took his hands. Marcus, I need you to understand. I'm not asking this just for my species or for political protection. When I think about the future, about rebuilding from nothing, I can't imagine doing it without you. And the thought of our child, human and Zalari, proof that life find a way, it feels like hope made real. Partnership confirmed, Dr. Vasquez announced, entering with an official-looking document. Congratulations. You're now legally bound under both human and council law. The enforcement team will find it significantly harder to simply take ZYera now. But not impossible, Marcus said. No, not impossible, which is why Phase 2 of our plan is critical. She handed them each a medical injector. Hormonal optimization, completely safe, but designed to maximize compatibility. If you're serious about this path, Marcus looked at the injector, then at ZYera, his wife. He realized with a start. In the span of days, he'd gone from solitary salvager to a married man contemplating fatherhood with an alien woman who might be the last of her kind. Together, Zuaira asked, holding up her injector. Together, Marcus agreed. They administered the injections simultaneously, a small act that felt monumentally significant. Now, Dr. Vasquez said, all business, we need to get you somewhere secure. The council team will arrive soon, and they'll challenge everything. But with the partnership legal and the biological process initiated, you'll have grounds to fight their claims. Where can we go? Zuaira asked. The station isn't safe, and we have no ship. Actually, a familiar voice said from the doorway, you do. They turned to see a woman in a pilot's jacket, human, with short dark hair, and amused eyes. She looked at Marcus with fond exasperation. Hello, little brother, she said. Heard you got married without inviting family. I'm Hurt. Sarah? Marcus stared in shock. What are you doing here? Dr. Vasquez called me, Sarah-chan said, entering the office. Said you'd gotten yourself into the middle of an interspecies incident and might need an extraction. Lucky for you, I was only 2 systems away. You know each other? Zuaira asked. Marcus didn't mention his sister was one of the best smugglers in the outer systems. Sarah grinned. I'm wounded. Also, you must be Zuaira. Welcome to the family. Fair warning, our parents are going to have questions about the lack of a proper ceremony. Can you get us out? Marcus asked. Already arranged. My ship's registered under 3 different names with credentials that'll stand up to anything short of a full council investigation. But we need to move now. About a launch window in 30 minutes, and after that, things get complicated. They gathered what they could, research data, medical supplies, the precious vials of synthesized cure. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Vasquez pulled them aside one final time. The cure formula and all research data have been uploaded to secure servers across 12 systems, she said. Whatever happens, the information will survive. But, Zuaira, you need to understand, you're not just carrying data anymore. You're carrying the future. The child you might have, the proof that Zalari genetics can continue. That's what will change everything. No pressure, Zuaira said with dark humor. All the pressure in the universe, Dr. Vasquez corrected. But also hope, the rarest commodity of all. They made their way through the station using Sarah's smuggling routes, avoiding main corridors and security checkpoints. As they reached the docking bay, alarms began sounding again. Council's here, Sarah said, checking her communicator. Time to go. Her ship, the Defiant Hope, was built for speed and stealth. They boarded quickly, Sarah rushing through pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency. Where are we heading? Marcus asked as he helped Zyra strap in. First, anywhere but here, Sarah said. After that, I know some people. Independent colonies that don't recognize council authority. Places where you can disappear for a while, figure out your next move. The ship lurched as Sarah initiated an emergency launch, bypassing standard departure procedures. Through the viewports, they could see council enforcement vessels approaching the station. Hold on, Sarah warned. This might get bumpy. As the Defiant Hope shot away from the station, narrowly avoiding the incoming ships, Marcus reached over and took Clara's hand. She squeezed back, her grip strong despite everything. No regrets? He asked. None, she said firmly. Whatever comes next, we face it together. The ship jumped to hyperspace, leaving Harmony Station and the council forces behind. But Marcus knew they were only buying time. The real challenges, protecting Zyra, distributing the cure, and possibly creating the first human-Zalari hybrid, still lay ahead. In a quiet of hyperspace, Zyra leaned against him, her body finally, relaxing for the first time since their frantic escape began. Tell me about Earth weddings, she said softly. What traditions did we miss? As Marcus began describing human ceremonies, with Sarah occasionally chiming in with embarrassing childhood stories, he realized something profound. In saving one alien woman from starvation, he'd begun a journey that might save an entire species. But more than that, he'd found something he hadn't even known he was looking for. Love, it seemed, was the most universal constant of all. And sometimes, the universe's greatest miracles came from the simplest acts of compassion. The ship sailed on through the void, carrying its precious cargo. Not just the last prime carrier of the Zalari, not just the cure for a genocidal plague, but the hope of new life that would bridge two species and prove that diversity was not weakness, but strength. Behind them, the Council mobilized its forces. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the challenge of rebuilding a dying civilization. But in that moment, in the quiet of their cabin aboard the Defiant Hope, Marcus and Zyra had each other. And sometimes that was enough to change the universe. The independent colony of Haven's Rest floated in the void between claimed territories. A massive asteroid hollowed out and spun for gravity. It was the kind of place that didn't exist on official maps, where people went to disappear and questions went unasked. Sarah had contacts here, people who owed her favors and understood the value of discretion. They'd been in hiding for 2 weeks now, and the reality of their situation was beginning to settle in. Marcus and Zyra had been given a small habitat module on the colony's outer ring, far from the main population centers. It was cramped but secure, with its own life support and enough supplies to last months if necessary. Any word from Dr. Vasquez? Zyra asked, looking up from the genetic analysis she'd been studying on her tablet. The hormonal treatments had been taking effect, and there was a subtle glow to her skin that Marcus was learning indicated optimal health in her species. Encrypted message came through this morning, Marcus said, pulling up the communication. She's manufactured more cure doses and found 3 separate Zalari survivor groups willing to test them. Initial results are promising. How many survivors? Marcus hesitated. About 400 across all groups. Zyra closed her eyes, the number hitting her like a physical blow. 400. Out of millions. That we know of, Marcus said quickly. There could be more in hiding, on ships, in remote colonies. And with the cure only prevents further damage, Zyra interrupted. It doesn't reverse the fertility damage already done. Those 400, how many are young enough to have children? How many will find compatible partners, even with the genetic modifications? Marcus moved to sit beside her on their small couch, pulling her against him. Over the past 2 weeks, physical affection had become natural between them, a source of comfort in their isolation. We can't save everyone, he said softly, but we can save some, and their children, and their children's children. That's how species survive, one generation at a time. Zyra leaned into him, her hand resting on her abdomen in an unconsciously protective gesture. Speaking of which, I think it's time we knew for certain. Marcus's heart rate spiked. They've been following Dr. Vasquez's protocols precisely, optimizing their biological compatibility, but there was no guarantee it would work. The first human-Zalari hybrid was still theoretical, despite all the genetic models suggesting it was possible. ZYERA retrieved the medical scanner they'd been given, a military-grade device that could detect genetic changes at the cellular level. Her hands trembled slightly as she activated it. "Whatever happens," Marcus said, taking her free hand, "we'll face it together. This doesn't define your worth or our future." "I know," she said, but her voice was tight with tension. "But if it's negative, if we can't, the Council will use it as evidence that preservation through hybrid lines isn't viable. They'll renew their efforts to take me." The scanner hummed as it worked, analyzing her biology with painfully slow precision. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, it chimed. ZYERA stared at the display, her violet eyes widening. Without a word, she handed it to Marcus. The text was in multiple languages, but the meaning was clear. Viable embryo detected. Genetic composition: 48% Zalari, 47% human, 5% novel combinations. Estimated gestational period: 10 months standard. Health status: optimal. "We did it," Marcus breathed. ZYERA, She cut him off with a kiss, tears streaming down her face. When they separated, she was laughing and crying simultaneously, her skin cycling through a rainbow of emotional colors. "It's real," she whispered. "A child. Our child. The first of a new kind of life." Marcus pulled her close, his own eyes burning with unshed tears. The weight of what they'd created, not just a child, but living proof that her species could survive in a new form, was overwhelming. "We need to tell Dr. Vasquez," ZYERA said after they'd held each other for long minutes. "And Sarah, and... Oh, Marcus, what do we do now?" "Now," Marcus said, "we protect you both. The Council will escalate when they learn about this. They'll either try to claim the child as property of all species, or they'll declare it an abomination. Either way, we need to be ready." As if summoned by his words, their comm unit chimed with an urgent message from Sarah. "Family meeting now. We got problems." They found Sarah in her ship's common area, along with 2 other humans Marcus didn't recognize, an older man with military bearing and a woman whose sharp eyes suggested intelligence work. "Marcus," ZYERA, Sarah said, her usual levity absent. "This is Colonel Zhang and Agent Rivera. They're part of an informal network that's been monitoring the Zalari situation." "Ms. Chun," Colonel Zhang said, focusing on ZYERA with respectful intensity. "What I'm about to tell you may be disturbing, but you need to know. The plague that destroyed your colonies wasn't random. We've traced its origin." ZYERA's grip on Marcus's hand tightened. "Boo, a coalition of interests," Agent Rivera took over. "Corporate entities that wanted Zalari technology without competition. Political factions that saw your species' declining population as an opportunity. Even elements within your own government who believed controlled extinction was preferable to slow decline." "You're saying my own people were involved?" ZYERA's voice was hollow. "A small faction," Rivera confirmed. "They called themselves the Sunset Council. They believed the Zalari should face extinction with dignity rather than watching their civilization slowly crumble. The bioweapon was supposed to be quick, merciful. They murdered children and called it mercy. The point is," Colonel Zhang interjected, "these groups still exist. And they've learned about you, about what you represent. The Sunset Council remnants see you as perpetuating suffering. The corporate interests want to control any cure. And the Galactic Council." He paused. "They've issued a new directive." Sarah pulled up a holographic display showing an official council document. "They've declared any human Zalari hybrid an illegal genetic experiment. Any such offspring are to be terminated, and those responsible prosecuted for crimes against genetic purity." The room went silent. Marcus felt ZYERA sway beside him and quickly helped her to a chair. "They can't," she whispered. "Even the council wouldn't murder a child." "They're not calling it murder," Rivera said grimly. "They're calling it preventing genetic contamination. There's already a task force being assembled, led by someone called the Purifier." "I've heard that name," Sarah said. "Religious extremist who believes species mixing is an affront to cosmic order. He's been linked to attacks on interspecies couples across 3 systems." "So what do we do?" Marcus asked. "We can't keep running forever, especially with..." He gestured helplessly at Zuaira. Actually, Colonel Zhang said, that's why we're here. There's a group of us, humans who believe in protecting innocent life regardless of species. We've been preparing for something like this. Safe houses, medical facilities, even legal challenges to the Council's authority. Why would you help us? Zuaira asked. Because, Zhang said simply, humanity's history is full of times when people decided other people weren't really people. When they justified atrocities with talk of purity and contamination. We learned, eventually, that diversity is strength. Your child represents that principle on a galactic scale. Plus, Rivera added with a slight smile, we're curious. A successful human-Zalari hybrid could open up entirely new fields of genetic medicine. Diseases that plague one species might be cured by antibodies from another. Your child could be the key to medical breakthroughs we can't even imagine. Our child is not an experiment, Marcus said sharply. No, Rivera agreed. But they're hope. For both species. Sarah cleared her throat. There's one more thing. The network Zhang and Rivera represent. It includes some significant players. Scientists, military personnel, even politicians. People who can provide real protection. But it comes with a cost. What kind of cost? Zuaira asked. Visibility, Zhang said. Right now, the Council and others can operate in shadows because your situation is secret. But if we go public, controlled release of information, testimony before sympathetic committees, medical documentation of a healthy pregnancy, it becomes much harder for them to act against you. You want to make us symbols, Marcus said. You already are symbols, Rivera corrected. We want to make you survivors. Zuaira was quiet for a long moment, one hand pressed protectively over her still flat abdomen. I need to think. This isn't just about me anymore. Of course, Zhang said, standing. Take your time, but not too much. Every day, the pregnancy progresses is another day closer to a point where even the Council won't dare act. We need to get you somewhere with proper medical facilities before then. After they left, the three of them sat in silence. Finally, Sarah spoke. For what it's worth, I think they're right. Hiding only works for so long. Eventually, you need to stand and fight. Easy for you to say, Marcus snapped. It's not your wife and child with targets on their backs. No, Sarah said evenly. It's my sister-in-law and my niece or nephew. You think I'm not invested in keeping them safe? Zuaira looked up sharply. You said niece or nephew. The scanner couldn't determine gender yet. Sarah grinned. Call it Aunt's intuition. Plus, I may have hacked the medical scanner for a more detailed analysis. Want to know? No. And Marcus said simultaneously, then looked at each other and laughed. We'll find out when they're ready to tell us, Zuaira said. Some mysteries are worth preserving. That night, in the privacy of their quarters, Marcus and Laura lay together in the narrow bed, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing the delicate ridges along her spine. What are you thinking? He asked. About names, she admitted. Human names, Zalari names. How do you name a child who belongs to both worlds? And neither. We'll figure it out. We have time. Do we? She shifted to look at him. Marcus, what if they're right? What if hiding makes us more vulnerable, not less? Then we fight, Marcus said. But we fight smart. We build allies, document everything, make it politically impossible for them to move against us. And if politics fail? Then we run. There are places even the Council can't reach. Remote colonies, uncharted systems. We disappear completely if we have to. Zuaira was quiet for a moment. I don't want our child born in hiding. I want them to have a home, a community. I want them to know both their heritages without shame. Then, that's what we work toward, Marcus promised. Whatever it takes. She kissed him softly. How did I get so fortunate? To find you in the ruins of my world. I'm the lucky one, Marcus said. I found purpose. I found you. I found. He placed his hand over hers on her abdomen. I found a future I never imagined. The next morning, they met with Zhang and Rivera again, this time in a secure conference room deeper in the colony. Dr. Vasquez joined them via encrypted hologram, her image flickering but clear. I've reviewed the medical data, she said without preamble. The pregnancy is progressing better than our most optimistic models predicted. The genetic integration is seamless. This child will be truly unique, not just a mixing of genes, but an entirely new expression of life. Which is why we need to protect them, Zhang said. I'm proposing we move you to Earth. Earth? Zyera said, surprised. But that's the human homeworld, Zhang confirmed. Also the seat of human political power and home to our